Cheers, Mav. Thanks for that introduction. It's great to be here again with both you and Darren. Hope everyone's doing well. So, most importantly, I would like to welcome our guest, CryptoTaxCalculator. Would you like to introduce yourself, your background, how you got into crypto, and a little bit about crypto tax generally?
Yeah, thanks, Jasper. Yeah, Shane here, one of the founders behind CryptoTaxCalculator. We're a tax software platform created in 2018 with the particular focus of solving the pain points around Web3 transactions. So if you're trading on a decentralized exchange, participating in liquidity pools, flipping NFTs on-chain, adding your MetaMask wallet, anything like this, it starts to get really, really hard because essentially when you're in the Web3 space, you're not you don't have a trusted third party intermediary who could provide you with the equivalent of a transaction statement or a bank statement like you would in traditional finance. So typically if you trade on a brokerage account, whether that's Robinhood or Stake or whatever you're using, they're able to provide you with a transaction history at the end of the year. And then you just give that to the accountant and your taxes are pretty much sorted. Not really an issue. But when you're being your own bank, quote unquote, there isn't anyone there who you can trust to do that for you. There's just nobody who has overall visibility of all your transaction history. Even if you're just trading on a centralized exchange and then you start to interact with on-chain or even between exchanges, because the interoperability of being able to quickly move currencies between exchanges, etc., it's very unlikely that any one platform has complete visibility of all your transaction history. And when you go and do your taxes, you actually need every single transaction, any action that you've ever taken, you need to be able to record that, because otherwise the numbers won't add up. You'll end up paying the incorrect tax. You'll probably end up paying too much tax. And on top of that, the auditor, if you're unfortunate enough to get audited by the tax authority, they can very quickly run a few checks and balances and realize that there's discrepancies in your trading history that haven't been properly recorded, and they absolutely hate that. That's when you get a red flag. That's when you get everything pulled up and you have to go through an entire process and typically get slapped with penalties. So
It's
not
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 pretty.
yeah, not great. So it's a really actually we find it's actually really engaging for users, because regardless of what protocol you're married to, what blockchain you love, what exchange you use, a lot of people have these problems, and they're starting to realize just how painful it is. And it is really painful. Like, we've got users who come through and they're getting audits and they haven't done their transaction histories, like they haven't maintained it for 4 years, and then absolute panic. It's like somebody's been bitten by a shark and they're bleeding out on the beach. Like, that's the kind of panic state that they're
Right,
in.
right.
And so yeah, it's proper like 9 out of 10 pain point for a lot of crypto users, and for a lot of people, like people in the space, it's kind of seen as a bit of an it's a post sales problem, really. Like, you get the transactions, you interact with the customer, like they trade on the decks or whatever, like see you later. It's only like 9 months later or whatever, when they have to do their tax return, that they realize how much of a pickle they've got themselves into. And it could leave like a lot of these users, we find, like with a really sour taste in their mouth when they realize just how difficult it is and how little support they have in the process. So yeah.
I've onboarded quite a few people into crypto, and I found that at least top three most common complaint I've gotten is that taxes are really hard in the space, especially if you're trying to do anything fancy. So, with that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about how your platform specifically works?
Yeah, so what we do is we've been building it up with Web3, top of mind. So really trying to make it easy for the user. When you sign up to the platform, you have your public wallet address, you just paste that in, select the network that you're trading on, whether that's Ethereum or Solana, paste it in. We'll try to pick up any other networks that you've been interacting with that wallet on. And then you just go through and add in all your public wallet addresses, Also your centralized exchange activity like Binance or Coinbase, or if you're unlucky enough to use FTX, all this type of
Oof.
information. And then you'll have a full transaction history in the application. It combines everything back into fiat denominated values, everything in the same format. You can clearly see what's going on. We've got all these tips to try to help you walk through if there are any issues with the data. Occasionally, users might forget about a particular wallet they used in 2016, or some Edge ICO exchange back in 2018. Like, there's those types of things. So we'll try to walk you through and isolate, what's happening, what still needs to be addressed, etc. And then you could just, once you're finished with that process, you can go through, start to download these reports, either give them to your CPA or accountant, depending on who you're working with, or you can export them into TurboTax format, upload it straight away into TurboTax if you're using that platform to file your taxes. Or if you're, depending on the country, like in Australia, we've got the MyTax platform, MyGov platform, so you can download reports and plug it into that tool. So yeah, it's really just, crypto tax is one part of your overall tax situation in most circumstances, but we're just trying to make that, pretty straightforward. Just need to get in there, dust off the inertia that I think comes with doing a crypto tax,
Right.
and just get cracking.
I feel like one of the most important things in this post process is just that inertia of having to go through and just verify each transaction is inputted properly. Does your platform make that easier in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually been going through, what we do is actually try to map out every single protocol. So all the smart contract interactions, the function calls that you make, there's a set of techniques there to try to understand what's going on and be able to pre-categorize that. For the ones that aren't categorized, we've got this similar transactions view. So if you do make a selection as a category, we'll be able to pick up, okay, well, look, you mark this one as a staking reward. There's actually 2,032 others of them, based on these kind of set of criteria, such as, the function call, the contract address, etc. Kind of like, there's some intelligence there to try to pick up, oh, look, you probably want to do this similar category selection for these other transactions. So it's just about trying to put together a set of tools, like a set of techniques, to try to make the whole process streamlined, and particular focus on what all the kind of difficulties and interesting accounting scenarios you can get yourselves into in the Web3 space.
Speaking of interesting accounting, staking has some pretty unique profiles, right? Depending on what method you use, uh, because LSDs and solo staking can give you the whole spectrum, right? So you have liquid staking tokens like wrapped stETH, or I'm sorry, just stETH, where the token rebases and you have this daily income flow, which can create thousands of transactions. But then you also have rETH, where this sort of like this unstaking staking process is very similar to a DEX trade. But then on the third hand, you also have the operations of node operate. You have the possibility of node operation, where you have this steady income stream, but then you also have periodic larger boosts. But then the opt-in of what Rocket Pool specifically calls the smoothing pool. So how does your platform work with Rocket Pool, given that they have these relatively unique profiles?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's the way I like to think about it, there's actually two separate issues. There's the bookkeeping, which is how do you get the data into the platform and tag these different transactions or categorize them so that they're appropriate. And then there's what is the tax implications of this transaction history in the first place. So how it works, for example, you add in your wallet address, we'd be able to pull in those transactions, the interactions that you've done with Rocket Pool, and ideally that's already pre-categorized for you, and you can adjust those categories if required. So that side of things is relatively straightforward. Rebasing is particularly interesting. It depends how the transactions are getting created against the wallet address in the first place. That could be kind of its own bucket of weeds, I guess. But outside of that, it's fairly straightforward. If you've got transactions on the blockchain happening, then you can be able to pick that up The thing with rebasing, it depends on the protocol, but sometimes they can have, it's just a state change. It's not actually transactions being published on the blockchain, which can cause problems because it's not clear when the transaction really has occurred, or if it's just still,
Right.
or like at what point does it get executed. Um, when it comes to the tax implications from an accounting perspective, the reality is right now, when it comes to liquidity pools or staking, there's a few different questions that arise from just an accounting or legal perspective, and this isn't tax advice. Always go talk to your professional before just listening to Twitter and blindly from somebody on Twitter. So, but having put that disclaimer out there, if you talk to these different professionals, there is a bit of a grey area as to whether, let's take like adding liquidity as a baseline example. There's this question of, or like, depositing funds, and like you said before, it looks a lot like a DEX trade in a sense, and whether that is a disposal from a tax perspective, or like because of a change in beneficial ownership, or if it is a deposit and you still have beneficial ownership, and so there isn't a disposal event. It's just really like a deposit, and if you do receive a token back, it's almost like a deposit certificate. So they're like the two general frameworks of how to think about it. Is that perhaps there's and basically the legal backstop for this is this idea of beneficial ownership and who holds beneficial ownership of this asset, and that could be fairly nuanced. It could depend on the T's and C's to a large extent. If you're interacting with a smart contract, there might not be terms and conditions, and it might. And what's quite unique about Web3 is that it's not very clear that the smart contract itself is an entity. Like what is it?
Right.
And so it's quite nuanced. There's actually a lot of discussion I've personally been involved in with different reviews around this, like actual, with Treasury, and probably going to get some more clearer guidelines around this over the next year, I'd even say. It's been a bit of a time in the making because it is new technology there. And so importantly, today, if you need to do your taxes, you still need to do your taxes even if the guidelines aren't out yet. So really it's about coming up with, I guess, reasoning as to what option you have chosen and why, and being able to support that. Obviously, if you engage with a tax professional and you get a legal opinion, that's great evidence, like great support, but not everyone can go and afford, the $5,000 or the $15,000 to get independent legal advice. Sometimes you can actually engage with the tax authority directly, and they can give you what they call a private ruling. But also, that's not ideal for a lot of users. They might not want to come forward to the tax office. There might be fear around this, etc. You could read up on general guidelines that your tax authority has already published, or ask in forums. Some of these tax offices have forums. But ultimately, you do need to make a decision as to whether that's a disposal event or a deposit event. And you need to be, the most important point here is to be consistent. So you can't just pick and choose and go, okay, well, look, it benefits me in this scenario because it would create a loss if I disposed of it. But in this other scenario, I'm going to treat it as a deposit because it's, similar to it. Otherwise, it would be triggering a gain. So you can't pick and choose. And in the software, how we handle this is essentially we've got these settings in the toggles, so you can have these particular types of transactions which are tagged appropriately, and then you can just toggle it. Is it a deposit or is it a disposal for tax purposes? You can have a look at the tax implications, play around with it essentially and try to work out, what are you going to do? If you can get legal advice, that'd be great. But essentially try to, at least you can work out, and once you have made a determination as to how to handle this, you could be consistent in that application as well. And then if there's guidelines that comes out from these tax officers in the future, you can have a look at what those guidelines are, and if you have to make amendments to your tax return, you can come back and amend it. And like say if you chose one particular setting, but then the government comes along and says, oh, look, we don't really like that. Well, then you can always go back and potentially change it and amend it and say, well, look, I was doing this stuff. It was new. You came out with these guidelines. I've now, updated my report
Right.
because of these guidelines. That's generally speaking what we're seeing at the moment. That's been pretty fine. But
I
what they
think
really
the
don't, right?
I think the Liquid Collective actually put out a really good tax report, or their own opinions, with the staking sort of larger players on how they think different staking income should be handled. And I think that it touches a lot on what you were saying about beneficial ownership and the various different gray area interpretations that are on the table. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and informs, and how users can be informed based on those decisions. Do you have
Yeah.
any comments about that port? Are you familiar with it? The
I'm
Liquid
not
Collective one?
familiar to that specific paper. We do
Mm-hmm.
have a bunch of papers on our own website. We've got all types of tax lawyers. They'll publish things on our websites, and obviously you can always reach out directly to these tax professionals as well to seek independent opinions. I would say what I have seen in the space is that the reality is there's lots of different opinions. And it might even be a case where some opinions are right in some circumstances, whereas other opinions are right based on other circumstances, and that's back to the T's and C's. So it is like genuinely a bit of a grey area, and that's probably that's probably the reality. Um,
Right.
what could even happen is that the tax office comes out and says, look, we know this is quite nuanced. It's not really user friendly. Like it's not clear. So here's some general guidelines for like A, B, C. Here are the cases, and this is what you would do, and you've got to work out which one. But there might even be a way of like nominating that you're going to do it this particular method, and it's just consistent regardless of the T's and C's. And that might even be like a new novel way of doing it. So it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like until it's actually established either through legislation or via court system, via a judge. So, there's actual questions that come up and that gets tested in a court. Then up until that point, it's really what the lawyers are doing are just looking back on previous case law, etc., and forming a view or an opinion. And if the truth of it is these opinions are basically probabilistic guesses as to what the judge would say or what the tax office would find appropriate. And that's kind of the reality of it. So you kind of it is still a grey area. It's just good to know kind of what the potential situation outcomes could be, and also the like legal reasoning about beneficial ownership, etc. So it is worth certainly reading some of these guidelines, but unfortunately, it's not black and white. It's a bit grey.
Yeah. So we've been so far discussing this from a very American perspective, but what other countries perhaps do you support? And
Yeah.
how is the staking landscape a bit different depending on that jurisdiction? To your own knowledge, obviously this is not tax advice.
So we support the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Spain. There's a whole lot of countries in Europe. I think now it's about 24 different countries that we support. And so you could go in there, sign up, select your country. Then we've got some default settings. And then you can also tweak those default settings, like I kind of described with, staking rewards or adding liquidity. I think when it comes to staking rewards, it's still a little bit unknown, even across all countries. There hasn't been like very specific guidelines that have been put out there yet. There's these the most likely scenario is that the reward themselves is income, similar to interest. That's generally speaking kind of the case. But there is an argument that potentially it's beneficial. So it's akin to baking bread, where you kind of create these transactions, and in some jurisdictions, um, mining rewards are actually treated as they're not treated as income, they're treated as zero cost basis if you're an individual investor, because they're like a reward, almost like a gift or something like this. And so, it'd be interesting to see if something like this is adopted for any staking rewards that are the result of, consensus mechanism, like a reward for a consensus mechanism.
I've seen also arguments for staking income to be treated like farming produce and like crops.
Yes, yeah. So there's a few, but what's the phrase? The cat's out of the bag still. I'm not sure what the phrase is, but it's still out up in the air. What the
Jury's still out.
Yeah, exactly. The jury's still out, literally, on exactly how that will be treated. But you can play around in the toggles. It's a lot like a calculator, so you can at least understand what the different tax impacts are depending on the different views. You can be a bit more educated about how to approach those thorny issues, I suppose. But even with staking reward, it's income, for example, and then you've got it in a smart contract. But then there's the question: is the income derived when it hits the smart contract, or is it derived when you approve of it and it's withdrawn into your wallet? And there's good reasons to argue that perhaps it's almost like a term deposit where the interest is derived in the on the as it gets received into the term deposit account and not when you draw it out into your checking account. But then there's real practical reasons as to why you might not want to do that. Namely, it's very hard to see. There's not really any clear transactions being published on the blockchain. It's just like a state-based result.
Right.
Really, it's the approval that kind of solidifies that state when you do withdraw. So it's a bit in the weeds, those ones. Practically speaking, you got to do what you could do. And for most listeners, if it's a significant amount of money, then this becomes much more important, because how much is at stake, depending on what rule you select, it can be very significant. But for most users, they're just trying to get by. They don't want to commit tax fraud. They understand that it's a bit of a grey area. And really, you're just trying to come up with a way that's consistent. It makes some sort of logical sense. It's supported by at least some guidelines out there. You're not just doing something totally random. You've got a way of kind of supporting the methodology that you've used, and then just keeping, actually do your taxes, file it. You're a big step ahead of a lot of people. And then if something comes up with these changes in guidelines, then you can always keep an eye on it and amend it as we get more information.
You absolutely will be in better standing if you just make an honest effort to try to justify and take it in a proper light than you will if you try to just ignore the taxes and hope nothing happens. So definitely encourage taking it seriously as best you can. And in the realm of taking things seriously, how does CryptoTaxCalculator handle privacy and security?
Yeah, so we're SOC 2 compliant, which is the same level like SOC 2 Type 2 we're going through at the moment. We're already Type 1. It's the same level for most other accounting software platforms out there. So, if you're using Xero or QuickBooks, that's the kind of route that we've taken in terms of security. So that's all, for example, PwC also uses our platform as an example. So you've got to go through those processes to make sure that we've got correct privacy and security settings for accounting.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good to know for peace of mind. Another question I have is, what are your thoughts on non-rebasing wrapped versions of rebasing tokens? So Rocket Pool doesn't have this wrapping necessary. It is just purely a value accruing token. So it seems like in some jurisdictions, that staking process and unstaking process is much more simpler and a different profile than what you have with a rebasing token. So do you have any general thoughts on just that distinction?
Yeah, generally speaking, rebasing tokens are a total nightmare from an accounting perspective. I personally try to stay clear of that completely because it's just going to create a huge amount of work for my accountant. It's just quite hard because there's kind of it's the typically the rebasing isn't published on chain, it's just a state change. So it's hard to actually see what the transaction is, and you kind of got to make these virtual transactions to account for the differences. In the case where you're really just swapping it, like swapping a currency and then swapping it back, etc., that could be beneficial. It's much cleaner what's actually happening because the transactions are happening on chain, so we can pull in that information. There is a question as to whether that leads to disposal or deposit event. There is this one argument that it's almost like buying an ETF, and then that ETF kind of goes up in value, and then when you withdraw it back into another currency over time. And so, is it like an index that you're buying into and then it's accruing value? Or is it more like a deposit certificate that you're kind of holding and then you can claim back the reward? So the jury's a bit out on that one, but something to think about from a tax perspective.
Yeah, that holding a receipt-like thing, or what's the term? A representative that for that definitely gives a different tax profile. The liquid staking article did liquid collective article focused a lot on that concept.
Yeah.
So for our final question, what would you say is the biggest difference between your platform and other competitors?
Yeah, so biggest difference is really focusing on the complexity in the Web3 space. So being able to handle on-chain activity across all of the different EVMs, Solana, Avalanche, Arbitrum, like all those different chains, as well as handling the centralized exchanges. A lot of the other platforms came out during the 2017/18 ICO bubble, and if you're around back then, there was actually the common pain point was just having 20 different centralized exchanges because you're just bouncing between ICO or swapping, like all types of degen-like activity. But typically, a lot of this was still done in centralized exchanges and not, decentralized exchanges like Uniswap only really got popular in 2020. And then 0x protocol was kind of popular back in 2018. We initially started with the support, really thinking about DEXs in particular with the 0x protocol, and then expanding that out into Uniswap. And it's really grown a lot since then, the on-chain space. I think just foundationally being able to handle this level of complexity, we built the code base up from day one with this in mind, and I think that's really starting to show in the ability of some of the competitors to be able to keep up with the space in comparison to what CTC is doing. So if you've got any complex on-chain activity, any NFTs, DeFi, decentralized exchange activity, anything like this, then I'd strongly argue that CryptoTaxCalculator is the best platform for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shane, from CryptoTaxCalculator, for joining us today and answering some of our tax-related questions. If you're listening in and have any tax-related questions, feel free to drop them in the Discord or request, and we can try to get them to Shane at some point. In the meantime, we will be switching over to the second half of our call, where we cover the bi-weekly. So before that, Shane, any final comments?
All good on my end. Thanks so much for hosting this. For any of the listeners, it's CryptoTaxCalculator.io. That's the website. So you can just type that into Google. Typically, just type in CryptoTaxCalculator. We're usually the first organic response that comes up there. So
sweet. Thanks again. Alrighty, now jumping into our bi-weekly update. Darren, you here with us?
I am. Thank you, Shane.
Sweet.
Thank you for that. I am. I actually use CTC, so it's great to hear you talking about it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Good to have you, Darren. Let's jump in. It has been a fun couple of weeks for Rocket Pool, and a busy one if you've been following along on the testnets. In terms of metrics, things are just humming along as the protocol grows quietly in the background. jumping into the smart node where things get juicy though. Release Candidate 2 was made available for testing on Gurley, and importantly, if you're listening, do not use this on mainnet. There has been a ton of invaluable support and information that has been generated from community beta testers. So, Darren, do you want to just give us a little overview about the progress of Rocket Pool towards Atlas and how the Gurley testnet has progressed over these past couple weeks?
Yeah. So Gurley's been really, really good. So obviously we did a lot of testing when we were on Shishang, and some kind of early alpha testers tested on Shishang as well. We released to Gurley, was it last week? Time is really flying. And it's been going really well. Joe has been integrating a lot of feedback from the community, and it's just been making the smart node kind of better and better and better, which is fantastic to see. We discovered, probably, a few kind of little bugs and that sort of thing. Nothing kind of major necessarily. The one that we did yesterday was probably the biggest one. Kind of changing the way the distributor works.
There were two minor ones that were low level that were sort of bumped up, right? And then this medium class?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And that's because it's a kind of so it's kind of a grief that we knew about, we weren't as worried about, because it does involve somebody, spending 8 ETH to grief you, or sorry, up to 8 ETH to grief you, or to grief a node operator. But one of the things that kind of the bug bounty highlighted was this kind of front running thing, and also the fact that because currently there's like a user distribute, which essentially enables anybody to kind of distribute the balance for a node operator. There's kind of reasonings behind that I won't go into right now, but the delay for that is kind of 14 days, and that needed to be longer, because we ideally need a node operator to kind of distribute that themselves, if they need to. So there was a couple of things that kind of came out of that bug bounty that we thought, well, actually, we should really apply a fix, particularly to the front running thing, which is essentially where somebody could front run a distribute balance, and kind of get someone slashed. Now it would involve, again, as somebody spending 8 ETH to do it, but we kind of thought that this front running thing was worth fixing. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And we originally thought there wasn't necessarily an easy way to do it, but once we kind of really looked into it, in fact, we come up with quite an easy way of fixing that. And so we've applied that to Gurley to, so that's not actually in the protocol anymore.
So it sounds like a fairly irrational attack from the attacker's point of view, but one that's still important to address from the protocol's perspective, just to ensure maximum resilience. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, somebody risking that amount, they're essentially in the best case for the node operator, they're gifting 8 ETH to the node operator, or
wow.
at least 4 ETH. But with the front running thing, it was less. That was less clear. They could actually do it without that, without the worry of that element of it. So that's why we decided to kind of focus on the front running and the front run attack. Try to get so that we don't have that on there, and so that they can't do that. So now it's not risk free. It's they still have to spend the 8 ETH, but it's not the node operator now has the chance to not get slashed. They essentially, what it means is that someone will send 8 ETH to their contract now, and a node operator will see it and go, well, that's silly, and And then that does mean that the node operator will have to exit to be able to, because they won't be able to distribute any of their funds at that point, because if they do, it'll think it's like a full withdrawal. Well, actually, the node operator, sorry, the smart node will stop them from doing that. But you know, if a node operator was really intent, they could do it via the smart contracts. So in this case, what we do is we're going through this process of making sure that that we've kind of minimized this griefing risk essentially, and we've got now multiple layers on which we can stop it.
Awesome. Seems like a very inefficient attack, but one that we have to design around nonetheless. What have been the other major benefits of Gurley so far, other than the 3 or so minor bugs found and reported?
I think just the fact that we have so many eyes on it. So, you know, the feedback that we're getting is incredible. Is really good. You know, small little things. I mean, to be honest, apart from kind of that one that we've just kind of spoken about, which really is a security refinement rather than necessarily a major kind of bug or anything. You know, a lot of the work that Joe's been doing is kind of, again, refining the smart node so that it's just easier to use, that, you know, the messages are clearer, the process is a little bit better. So, you know, all of these things are starting to improve, and so it really is. I mean, and that's kind of what you want from Gurley. Gurley is our last test net before we go to mainnet, and so it is kind of the refinement period that we're in, to kind of go through and just make sure that all those elements work. Exercise it in ways that we didn't expect. You know, that's the best thing, is that, you know, we're putting out to people to use, and they are going to use it in a completely different way than we expect. So that's exactly what you want from that sort of testing. We've gone through and done as much structured testing as we can go through. Now it's up to the community to do that kind of unstructured kind of stuff. So, and they have been, people have been doing, you know, not silly things necessarily, but certainly things that you know, just to test things out and to poke it and prod it and that sort of things, which is excellent. This is just what you need.
Perfect. I think I remember from our last call we had something like 40 operators on our testnet. So again, shout out to everyone running a testnet node and helping us make sure Rockpool upgrade goes out without any problems. Joe had been talking a little bit about some bread in the Discord, talking about the steps towards release candidate 3. Is there anything you want to or can talk about what will be different from going RC2 to RC3, and maybe a little bit about the timeline on that one rollout?
So I believe the major difference is that kind of bug bounty that we've just mentioned. It'll include that, and in fact, you'll have to upgrade to RC3, and you'll also have to upgrade your mini pool delegate to be able to kind of distribute your balance, because unfortunately this change is not backwards compatible. Obviously, we won't have that on mainnet because we're going to, you know, roll it out as is now, but on Gurley, you'll have to kind of do that to continue testing.
Let's just break that down real quick so everyone understands. Yeah. So if you're running a Gurley node, after RC3 is out, you have to do both the smart contract or smart node upgrade and a delegate upgrade.
Yes, that's right. To kind of, like, most things will work, but the distribute balance won't, because of this kind of you know, backwards incompatible change.
Right, and this is just a quirk of having our release candidate 3 responding to this bug bounty in the middle of this period. This is not something that normal node operators on mainnet will have to deal with.
No, that's right. I mean, when well, okay, so they'll have to deal with it in the sense that so they won't have to deal with this specific thing, but it's a similar process on mainnet in the sense that when we do release Atlas to mainnet, you'll upgrade your smart node stack, which will obviously make it Atlas compatible, but it'll also make it Shanghai compatible as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we release Atlas, you will need to upgrade your. So you'll already be upgraded from the smart node perspective, but you will need to upgrade your delegate if you want to do, if you want to distribute your balance, and if you want to, do like mini pool reductions and that sort of thing. So if you want to use all the new stuff, which I think most people will do because they'll at least want to withdraw, they'll need to upgrade their delegate to the latest delegate.
If someone, however, for whatever reason, is very risk averse, though, they'll be able to stake just fine on the old delegate, right?
Yeah, they'll be able to stake. The only thing is, we're going to kind of take it on a case by case basis in terms of that. If they don't want to upgrade to the latest delegate, we can kind of help them unstake. So it is possible to kind of do that. We would advise, though, to just upgrade. Our kind of suggestion is to upgrade the delegate and use the Atlas way of withdrawing. But if they have a kind of a fundamental problem with that, then we're happy to kind of figure out how we can kind of work with them on that. But at this stage, that's the easiest way of kind of using the Atlas stuff, which includes withdrawals.
Got it. Awesome. So we have a question coming in from A35U, and they are wondering about the audits and if there's been any update to when the audit reports will be made available. And I'll
Yes.
throw in Immunify timeline as well.
Yes. So that's a great question. And in fact, we were talking about that today. So we've got both reports ready to go. The only thing we're umming and ahhing about is whether we just do a release of the reports basically today, or we wait for the last. So this bug bounty that we've just deployed, that's a unaudited change at this point in time. Sigma are looking at it, and they should be able to get back to us by the end of the week. So we're probably leaning towards that. So once that last piece is, because then we can say everything is audited. At this point, we can say everything is audited except that one change. So I'd prefer to just be able to say everything is audited. So I think we're expecting them to kind of do it by the end of the week. So that's probably when we're going to release the reports. Ideally by the end of the week. Worst case scenario will be Monday, but we're kind of just waiting on them to come back with that and all clear on that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, go on. And in terms of Immunify, that would be a similar time window in terms of once all the audits are done, including this last change, then we can move the code base over to Immunify, so that the bug bounties can start coming in for the Atlas stuff.
Got it.
But the reports have to be kind of out in the wild, for us to do that, which is why we have to work this critical path.
It's going to be super helpful to have the audit reports into the community with a little bit of a time period before the actual Atlas launch, so people can get comfortable with the contracts. I'm glad to see that we have a pretty close timeline to them being dropped. So is there anything else?
We were ideally going to be doing it this week, but because we decided to just go with this change, that's why we have to push it out.
Pretty unlucky timing in some ways with the bug report.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but yes and no. But yeah.
So, anything else you want to update us about the march towards Atlas?
So we will have more information on like the actual mainnet date and that sort of thing. Again, we want to try to make sure that this last contract change, there's nothing else that we need to do in terms of that. Once we're kind of very certain about that, then we'll actually put out like a proper date with a proper announcement and all of that sort of thing. We just want to kind of make sure that there's nothing there that's going to moves the date or anything like that.
Right. So we should hopefully be looking forward to that sometime in the next week or two. Moving on from Atlas-related things, the rETH world has been rETH and RPL world have been pretty busy. Integrations have continued to blossom, and I think things will be increasing at an even faster pace in the coming weeks due to one pretty significant upgrade we will talk about shortly. But from the top of the list, the Metronome protocol has integrated rETH into their platform. Metronome is based on Vesper, and it is a Rasper. These two protocols are sort of twin protocols. They allow for leveraging and shorting of LSD tokens with their synthetic token mETH. So this is a way to increase your rETH yield. However, this process does expose you to smart contract risk, and I encourage anyone interested in this to check out Metronome's documentation to make sure it's safe. But again, this is another way to increase your rETH yield if you are an rETH holder. Pretty cool to see all these different leveraged rETH protocols sort of coming out.
Just to add on to that about Metronome, we're likely to do a bit more with them, probably post Atlas, just in terms of more announcements and an opportunity to chat with them about what kind of product they offer, the opportunities for rETH holders. So watch the space. That's something that's been in the works for a little while, and they are looking forward to capitalize on the additional rETH capacity that will be made available with Atlas next month.
Yeah, they've also been pretty active in our Discord, in the rETH incentives channel, so they are a good community. Next up is Swiss Borg has onboarded RPL. This is a not quite a centralized exchange, but it is some kind of exchange platform for you to purchase RPL on through their own routing engine. So this is a bit more esoteric, so make sure you definitely check out the documentation on this one.
Swissborg are pretty well known. I feel like they're more popular in Europe. Some friends in the UK and Europe have said that it's quite popular. They offer quite a wide range of various, I guess, aggregation and centralized services, on-ramp, off-ramp, staking as well. So staking as in you can hold your ETH on their platform and they will connect to staking protocols. But yeah, it's kind of a big deal. As you said, Jasper, not a centralized exchange listing, a little bit more complex than that. But even still, I think it's quite significant. Perhaps it will lead to further integration in the future.
Sweet. Definitely looking for that kind of stuff. However, in the world of centralized exchange listings, they of course have continued. Since the Binance listing, there has been a flood, and this fortnight brings us ChangeX, BCM, Coins. I believe that's all of them. So these exchanges all have their own unique risk profiles, and if you are going to purchase RPL on them, I encourage you to do your due diligence.
Yeah, we've pretty much ticked off all the major exchanges now, but there are a lot out there, and I'm still chatting to a couple. They pop up every now and then, so I think the next bi-weekly we'll see a few more continuing to trickle in. Of course, as Jasper says, important that you do your own research about the various criteria and terms and conditions that each exchange might have.
Back in the world of decentralized exchanges, Gauntlet, a preeminent risk evaluation group, has recommended an increase for the borrow cap on rETH. So this is pretty great news, given that we want to see rETH maximally adopted in Aave, while still adhering to safe limits. So the fact that Gauntlet has sort of the further expansion of rETH is a good sign. This tweet by Gauntlet about the approval was shortly followed by Aave co-founder Mark Zeller posting that he would be requesting an increase for the supply caps.
And interesting to note, as well as that increase, he says, and I quote, until the Shanghai upgrade on April 12th, then up only in terms of supply cap. So certainly bullish on
Right.
rETH utilization within Aave once withdrawals are live.
Yeah, there's been pretty consistent and clear signaling from Aave that they're going to do what they can to increase the cap prior to Shanghai, but post Shanghai, we'll really see the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Darren, what are your thoughts on this sort of progressive iteration on the Aave cap and the signaling towards a theoretical large expansion post Shanghai?
Yeah, it's perfect. I think it's been sensible to have us kind of progressively increasing the ceiling. It makes perfect sense, and I wouldn't want it any other way, to be honest. I think debt markets have quite a big responsibility within the ecosystem, so it's good to kind of see them treating that extremely seriously. But it's really good to see the confidence that is growing in rETH, particularly from Gauntlet. Gauntlet have always been quite conservative about rETH, and it's been quite nice to see them coming out with these recommendations. So
they pretty much pulled a full 180 on rETH on their stance from the early days, if you remember back then.
Yeah, I think we've grown considerably since then, so that I think that helps. But yeah, it is good to see them kind of speaking about us in favorable, but definitely favorable terms.
It's pretty impressive that Rocket Pool is often being analyzed in the same breath as in the industry-leading titans of Lido and Coinbase. Really, it's those three and then a next tier at the moment. And
yeah, that is certainly good to see.
Yeah. And one thing that'll definitely be helpful for the ongoing debt market adoption of rETH is that the Chainlink Oracle, after many a year, is now officially live for rETH with the market price, not just the Oracle price. This is the market price, or the actively traded price of rETH on dexes. So this can be reliably used, very reliably, in leveraging any kind of money market, fixed markets, anything that requires being sensitive to the rETH market price can now be used for rETH through this Chainlink Oracle.
Yeah, so this is what's obviously helped Aave to feel confident in scaling. And if you have a look at the event section in Discord, poke around in there, I think there's 4 or 5 listed right now. You might get a bit of a sneak preview in terms of other protocols that are looking to integrate rETH and provide more opportunities to rETH holders leveraging that Chainlink Oracle functionality. It's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we've had, obviously the integrations have becoming thick and fast, but now that the Chainlink Oracle is in place, we're going to see quite a massive increase in protocols that actually are able to do it. A lot of them is a Chainlink Oracle is a prerequisite for their integration, and so they're kind of locking that in now. But it's really good. It's really good to kind of be able to have that locked down so that we can keep adding utility to rETH and getting those integrations in.
I definitely expect to see a flood of protocols integrating rETH, probably overwhelming us at some point from being able to keep up. I figure there's going to be at some point a moment where we realize this protocol using rETH for a period of time, for a month or so, that we didn't even realize.
We're gonna need another Mav.
Yeah, pretty much. Perhaps maybe even a bounty for someone to just keep track of rETH RPL integrations across the ecosystem, to make it easier for our users and community to navigate.
Yeah,
However, yeah.
that's a whole new rocket scan for
Yeah,
integrations, maybe.
yeah. I mean, soon we're going to need a rocket scan for just hyper staking rETH. I mean, I think there's like 4 or 5 different protocols you can try it out now. But going back to our biweekly for now, another protocol that has implemented rETH under the hood is BAO Finance. BAO Finance creates a wrapper token, BEEF, that you can also use to lever up your rETH. BEEF is a bit different than other hyper staking style tokens, given that BEEF from BAO Finance is actually a basket token that has a variety of both LST tokens like rETH, Steve, but also their governance tokens like LDO and RPL. So this is a different flavor of hyperstaking through BAO Finance, and they have their audit reports on their website. But again, this is risky, a different type of staking, so make sure you do your research. In a similar vein, Beta Finance has announced support for RPL. Beta Finance also has audit reports and an immunified bug bounty, and I believe Beta Finance is a permissionless money market where anyone can leverage RPL, and that the platform is specifically aligned towards shorting. So if you are looking to get downside coverage against your RPL staking stack, for example, perhaps check out Beta Finance. Again, now there are a variety of protocols in which you can do this, get some hedging done for your RPL. So make sure you do your due diligence in the process. Second to lastly, already the integration flood has began really. Tetsu Finance has announced support for rETH rebalancing. This is a pretty cool one I recommend reading further into, because they will automatically rebalance your rETH deposits in Aura and Balancer. So for those of you who are familiar with Rocket Pool's ecosystem, the number one TVL pool is the Balancer the Aura pool for rETH WETH, because this is what the Incentive Management Committee bribes the most. However, there is a trade-off where users have to choose between being in the Aura pool or in the underlying Balancer pool. Due to the complexities of bribing, sometimes it can vary which one is actually higher yielding, also depending on the TVL variance. What Tetsu Finance has aimed to do is automatically rebalance your rETH WETH deposit between Aura and the underlying Balancer to maximize APR. It's a neat little trick to probably boost APR marginal amount, but it is a clever way to build on the underlying building blocks that are available. They also have their audit reports available on their website, so if you're interested, check them out. Lastly, in this deluge of integrations is Parallel Protocol. Parallel Protocol has just added a proposal to add rETH as collateral on their platform. So hopefully, once this proposal gets some support, we can see rETH made as collateral on their money market as well. So overall, we've seen a flood this past fortnight of integrations, perhaps given that there was an overlap in that the Chainlink Oracle actually has been live for about a week now. Perhaps where this deluge is actually just because of that Chainlink Oracle going live. So yeah, this has been an eventful week in terms of integrations. hyper staking, collateral basket tokens, tons of different stuff. If you are interested in more detail, go check out the bi-weekly for direct links. Governance, of course, has not let up as well. There are some important topics going on. I'll start with voting. If you are an RPL delegate or node operator, make sure you vote on the IMC election. Both myself and Darren are in the running. There are 9 members of the Incentive Management Committee that must be chosen. And there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people running. So make sure you make the best choice. Darren, do you want to talk a little bit about the responsibilities of the IMC and maybe some qualities you think you would want in an IMC member?
Yeah, so the IMC has a charter. Its charter is basically to promote liquidity of rETH across across everywhere, essentially. There are kind of different goals that we're working towards, but certainly, having rETH on L2s for accessibility, and also for building integrations on those L2s, promoting liquidity on L1, particularly for kind of providing a safety net, but also for building up for those integrations, particularly lending markets, because lending markets require quite deep liquidity for liquidations and that sort of thing. So this is kind of the charter of the IMC, is to promote that liquidity on L1 and of course L2s to kind of meet the goals for rETH. So I guess what we're looking for. So the nominees, all the nominees are fantastic, which is great. Those nominees are they all are kind of interested in DeFi. Obviously, they're aligned with Rocket Pool in terms of their kind of interests and their goals. But they're also kind of interested in DeFi, interested in using, because a lot of it is kind of like, I think you're probably backing up on this as well. There's a lot of it is kind of like researching different protocols to figure out how we can best use them to meet that charter. It's kind of like talking with the protocols and kind of figuring out what sort of arrangements we can get with them. It's also kind of breaking it down and figuring out, okay, so what's the best strategy going forward to meet those goals.
I think the incentive committee, although that's never been formally discussed or made explicit, has been operating with this mindset of minimum viable liquidity in some broad aspect, where we're trying to maximize the amount of liquidity we can get with the RPL we inflate, while essentially want to minimize the burden on RPL holders while maximizing the value for rETH holders. To make this as harmonious of a balance as possible. And in pursuit of that, we need our members to be relatively up to date on how DeFi is advancing, right? So that we can be on the forefront of novel dexes, novel liquidity strategies, novel driving strategies, so we stay an agile marketplace participant. One thing that I was noting in the rETH liquidity incentives thread yesterday is that Rocket Pool currently bribes with about 100% of its monthly budget, whereas Lido, which is a sort of slower moving and older and larger entity, only bribes with about 15 to 20% and is forced to use rigid incentives for 75%. It's sort of a testament to I believe our incentive management committee's ability to be more flexible and adapt to the most advantageous of strategies for rETH holders. So if you are someone who is keen on DeFi, keen on AMMs, and keen on analytical thinking, that's pretty much who we want. And so if you're voting, I would suggest keeping those ideas in mind.
There's also the practical thing of signing transactions and
Right.
and kind of and checking transactions, which is definitely the fun part.
It's definitely the most crucial part because we've already seen a few instances of checkers catching small mistakes. So it's definitely something that we need. But going back into governance now, the GMC recently announced that with the help of ClimateDAO, Rocket Pool has become has become carbon neutral. We have offset over what we have estimated to be our entire proof of work era carbon output. I believe it was 1,000 tons of CO2 that has been offset through ClimateDAO's partners. This is something that actually generated a bit of controversy in the Discord server and on Twitter, given that some people weren't so sure that the protocol should be spending for this. However, the actual spend ended up being quite small, and the proposal was very sound and compelling if you look actually on the application. So I do stand with the GMC's decision to fund it. I think it provides value to the protocol overall.
Yeah, agreed.
There have also been some treasury reports posted on the forum by our lovely treasurer. So you can check up on those to make sure the flows of our finances are flowing properly. In terms of media and marketing now, there is a ton to go over here. Lodestar is a consensus layer client that has recently started a prize pool. If you are running Lodestar and you happen to propose a block using their latest client, you can enter into a prize pool. In this prize pool, there will be up to $25,000 in rewards. So you can, in fact, use Rocket Pool with Lodestar to potentially win a share of these prizes. Even if you're with the smoothing pool, I believe, they designed it in such a way that it's based on withdrawal addresses, and they've sort of just done a whitelist for the smoothing pool. So this is pretty cool enterprise, and I'm looking forward to see it help Lodestar expand their share of the network as it is useful for our network's resilience.
Yeah, to that point, right now, Lodestar usage is pretty low, so there'll be no concerns if you're looking at switching over there. ETH stake, you contributed 5K to that prize pool as well, so it's become a bit of a joint effort. You can see the terms and conditions by clicking through to the tweet from the biweekly, and then further through to there's a Medium article that Lodestar put together. A lot of details in there, including some commentary on Rocket Pool specifically. Believe you have to propose a block to be eligible, but it's open for quite a few weeks, and we're working on getting the Lodestar or someone from Lodestar on as a guest for a Twitter space. It'll probably be after Chappella, but yeah, coming soon. We can chat a bit more about that in more detail with Lodestar.
Sweet. We love our minority clients. Volcania, which is a platform for like analytics around tokens, has added RPL to their dashboard. So if you're interested, make sure you go check them out. This is a fun one. Rocket Pool participated in the recent zkSync era mainnet launch marketing campaign. And so people in the Discord were very, very interested to see what was going on and quite confused when this sort of mysterious door appeared on their timelines from various protocols. So it's going to be really fun to see how Rocket Pool can utilize the zkSync era layer in a mutually beneficial way. Hopefully, good things are coming there. I actually meant to ask this a while ago, Darren. But going back a bit, how are the oracles development progresses going across chains? I'm assuming that's taken sort of a backseat given all the Atlas work going on, but wondering where how that's fit in.
So actually, yeah, I meant to kind of give the IMC a heads up on that. When we release 1.9, that includes those oracles. The only reason why it's kind of been delayed is we decided so that we don't kill Joe. um, we would smash kind of 1.8 and 1.9 together instead of having like two separate releases. We would actually kind of just merge those two releases and pull them out as 1.9, so that we kind of like saved all the effort of because going through, actually releasing is quite monumental in terms of that. So that's the only reason why it's kind of been delayed, is because we decided to keep Joe alive, and
We like
and,
Joe.
and and combine those releases. So yes, that's essentially what's happening. So once 1.9 is released, which is not very long, then once the ODAL have actually upgraded to it, they will then start submitting those prices. So once they've kind of started doing that, and we've kind of monitored them for maybe a day or two, to make sure that everything's working as it should, then we'll be comfortable kind of letting everyone know that those they're out there in the wild, and then they can be used.
And so this is going to be for Polygon and ZK Sync, is that correct?
So it will be for. So we're already doing Optimism. It'll be Arbitrum and Polygon. ZK Sync, we have one last thing to kind of work through with them, but that will be coming very, very soon. Because ZK Sync is quite new, there's a couple of things that we just needed to work through. So that there's that. We're also kind of having a look at Starknet as well, but we're kind of that's kind of in the research bucket. But yeah, so it's mainly, I would say, Arbitrum and Polygon are the new ones, and then ZK as soon as we can lock this last thing down.
Is the potential Polygon ZK EVM also one that we would consider?
Yeah, I think we probably prefer that, because I think the Polygon ZK Sync EVM is like a proper L2, isn't it? So I'll need to double check all of that, but I would assume that would be maybe even our preference, so we can see how that kind of unfolds.
Sweet. Yeah, that's still sort of in the air, but going back now to our media marketing, rETH market cap has sort of been flirting with the top 100. It's currently, I think, 102. That'll be exciting to see that break into the top 100.
There's still a little bit of work needed to be done to make sure that the reflections of market cap and circulating tokens and all of that are fully up to date. There's just waiting on CoinMarketCap for one final update. They recently managed to plug in some APIs, so the circulating suppliers at least should be up to date. And then with one more change, we finally put that all to bed, and whether it's on CMC or CoinGecko, we should have market caps and suppliers matching up, which is great. And obviously that means that we get a fair and accurate representation in that market cap list.
Right, it's been a long and tedious process to try to just get accurate data reporting. Looking forward to when it's fully correct. Moving on, Illuminati DAO has invested 100 ETH of their protocol treasury with Rocket Pool. So it's cool to see the progression of DAOs continue to use rETH. We've seen that FX Street mentioned Rocket Pool could benefit in the upcoming Shibata hard fork. Token Motion, I want to highlight this one, is a community-grown project that was funded by the GMC, and they have released their first thread about Rocket Pool, and it's a gorgeous thread of animations describing how Rocket Pool's from a bird's eye view for the novice. So if you are looking for something to sort of introduce someone to Rocket Pool with, this is a great starting point. So big shout out to Sleety.eth for their lovely work putting this together for Token Motion. We had the first of 2 planned Atlas AMAs on Discord, which is now available on YouTube. This was quite the lengthy AMA, if I remember correctly, but had a ton of really important and useful information. The next Atlas AMA will be Euro Hour friendly, and I believe it has not yet been announced.
Yeah, that's right. So there is one that is mentioned in the Discord events list, but that is not the one we're talking about. The one that's kind of been scheduled will actually be with ETH Staker. So we're going to chat to them about Atlas, but then there'll be a separate, another kind of Rocket Pool community town hall event, as you said, Jasper, at a time that suits Europe. And similar to the last one, we'll try to get it running on Twitter Space. It's good to get that external outreach, but otherwise, Discord will be recorded, and with a few things changing and becoming a little bit more certain since the previous AMA that we had, it's good to run this second event, especially considering how significant Atlas is, and it'll likely take place not long before the upgrade itself goes live. Talking maybe a week, 10 days out, that sort of thing.
Got it. Yeah, that's probably a great time for that to happen, and it'll probably be a little bit of a party atmosphere, I'm imagining. So moving on now. Silo Finance joined as guests on our last community call, and now they are officially supporting rETH and RPL as they promised during that call. I believe now the APRs are properly displayed as well. There was a bit of an issue with that from last time. So check out the call if you're interested in how Silo Finance can do fixed market hyperstaking, another different flair of hyperstaking than the other hyperstaking methods I mentioned earlier. Isn't that crazy? Darren, in the meantime, was a guest on the Staking Rewards panel discussing post-Shanghai institutional ETH staking. So this is an interesting one. It featured representatives of Lido, Stakewise, Alluvial, and EtherFi. Darren, do you have any major takeaway from this Twitter space or discussion?
I now I've forgotten. It's lots happened in the meantime. But I think basically everyone was saying that institutions are definitely interested in staking. It's kind of like an obvious thing, kind of now. A lot of them will be kind of spinning up mini pools. So that's definitely a thing. And when we've kind of seen that as well, there just definitely does seem to be interest in that side of things. Just very positive about post Shanghai and the adoption of Ethereum staking in general, but in liquid staking, yes, but certainly kind of Ethereum staking in general.
I'd just say,
sweet. And
when I was putting the bi-weekly together, I did a bit of a double take on that exact call because I thought it's been a long time. Surely that was more than 2 weeks ago, but it actually was pretty much 2 weeks to the day since the bi-weekly went out. Lots happened between then and now, that's for sure.
Yeah, but if you were looking for a perspective on the institutional side of things, I'm sure it still holds up as a very useful piece of content. And speaking of useful pieces of content, Christine Kim, who actually interviewed Darren and Axel Stokes on the ETH Denver stage, has put out a piece with her firm Galaxy about the Shanghai hard fork. And in said hard fork, she covers a little bit about Rocket Pool and the fact that some other competitors will not be ready for withdrawals while Rocket Pool stands to be fairly quickly ready for withdrawals. So it was really nice to see that piece from Christine about Rock Pool's imminent upgrade and readiness for it.
Yeah, Christine is on the pulse and very sharp. So it's great that she's kind of putting out that content about Rocket Pool as well.
Yeah, she definitely has the ear of some of like the more research focused Ethereum community. So great coverage from her. We've also seen coverage from Crypto Russ about Rocket Pool's decentralization efforts. Seeking Alpha also published their research piece about Rocket Pool's strong fundamentals and upcoming major catalysts. So those are another cool pieces of community writing.
Yeah, just another example of the continued coverage that we're getting trickling through. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of an uptick as we go in towards the Shibata hard fork.
So this is an interesting story that I'm not actually familiar with. Mav, you had to cover for Darren apparently on the Exponential DeFi podcast. Is there a story here?
Oh yeah, Elon rugged us pretty much. Many such cases these days.
Classic.
Yeah, and I believe again, kind of lost the mists of time, but it was only 10 days or so ago. I think I was just kind of getting better. I was a little unwell after coming back from Denver, but my voice managed to stay intact. And it was just, a good chat with the guys from Exponential DeFi. So their podcast series is called DGen Responsibly, which we're, of course, all about here at Rocket Pool, especially in trading. There's a recording, if not on their Twitter account still, it is published as a podcast. Just a bit of a high-level chat about the protocol and a good example of some of the questions that came through. You could tell that they knew what they were talking about. So if you're listening to this, probably nothing new, but still it's always good to have a chat to these various different projects and protocols and get a bit more exposure for Rocket Pool.
On the flip side from this sort of community grassroots kind of coverage, we have some major big boy hitter coverage coming in from Delphi Digital. As they mentioned Rocket Pool in their sort of liquid staking video, with the gist being that they think of Rocket Pool as the most decentralized staking platform. There was also a consensus article that talks about the upcoming Shanghai upgrade. And in this, they talk about how the Atlas upgrade, and I quote, the Atlas upgrade will also present an opportunity for solo stakers to split their 32 ETH into 4 8 ETH mini pools, drastically increasing both the protocol's capacity to meet new rETH demand and also the solo stakers' earning potential. Great to see these two pieces, very positive pieces, coming out of the more well-respected and very established side of the space here. Consensus, of course, is an early investor in Rocket Pool, but also known for creating some of the most important pieces of the Ethereum ecosystem. So their continued support has always paid off. That brings us to the end of our bi-weekly, but before we end, we have a quick question coming in from Ken, who is wondering just about the details of how the oracles post data to the rETH values to L2s. He's wondering, I think, about the technicals, or also just broadly about if the ODA members are posting transactions to the L2s or just reading prices. Can you give him a little bit more color there?
Yeah, so how it actually works is the ODAL basically just call a contract. Kind of once they've done the balance submission, they call a contract, which I think it's like a leader section. So they not every one of them does it. It's just kind of like one of them does it. And what it does is that contract just reads the balance, the exchange rate, and then posts it using, so all of the L2s have like this L1 to L2 messaging thing in place. And so what it does is it just goes through and fires off messages to each of the, actually, I think we didn't aggregate it. So I think it's each every one. So the Odell node will say, oh, update it on Optimism, update it on Arbitrum, update it on, each kind of chain. And so there's a contract which for each of the, I think it's for each L2, it does this L1 to L2 message. And on the L2 side, there's a contract that is like an immutable contract that just receives that message, and then updates the price based on that. So that's basically how it works. And then and then on the L2 side of things, once it's in that contract, it means that you can then anything on chain can then query that price. So that's the kind of the breakdown of how it works.
Great, thank you for that detail. I see Ken typing, but I'm sure that was sufficient to answer. It was quite a good explanation.
Yeah, and
So
in fact, all that code is open source as well, so I can post that code as well. But all that code is in our repo.
So that summarizes our call for today. Any final comments before I jump into today's summary?
No, I think it's good.
I think the last bi-weekly was a bit of a trick one, right? Because we'd all just not long back from Denver, not just Rocket Pool and the community, but every other protocol and project out there, right? So kind of seemed like there was a dip of activity, but as usual, still lots going on behind the scenes, and going through that media and marketing section especially. It's been a big couple of weeks, but of course, probably nothing compared to the next couple of weeks. So looking forward to having a chat about all the exciting developments next time around.
That's right. After a healthy and brief correction on the bi-weekly price or bi-weekly length, I think we have resumed the up-only trend. So today's call started with our guest Shane from CryptoTaxCalculator, who talked about how their platform aims to be more DeFi friendly and might be a better solution for you in your process of doing your tax reporting. I think that one of the major takeaways of that section of the call was that if you are just being honest and doing your putting your best effort forward in trying to make a reasonable assessment of your tax liabilities and being consistent with that, you are probably going to be okay until we have better clarity, as there is a ton of gray area. But this is a very complicated issue, and I am not a tax professional. And if this is most certainly not tax advice, if you are going to make any tax decisions, make sure you consult with a professional first. The second half of our call, of course, covered our bi-weekly update, which is jammed packed. We talked at length about how the Gurley testnet has progressed over the past fortnight and the imminent release of Release Candidate 3, featuring support for recent bug fixes or minor fixes, tweaks, and features, essentially. This release candidate for testnet nodes will require a delegate upgrade as well as a smart node upgrade. So if you are on the Gurley testnet, make sure you are prepared for that. However, all things are trucking along for a mainnet release in April as planned. In the world of integrations, a huge bevy of protocols have started integrating rETH and RPL. Metronome Finance, which has their own stable ETH wrapper allowing for leverage. Swiss Borg, a form of exchange, a variety of sex listings. We then had Gauntlet recommend Aave increase the borrow cap for rETH, which was then followed with a proposal. Chainlink, very importantly, announced the activation of the rETH market price feed. So now we have rETH actively available on Chainlink, so that protocols writ wide can see the rETH value. This will make protocol onboarding much easier. Bao Finance announced a liquid staking token index, which will enable leverage as well. Beta Finance announced its RPL deposit pool for users to enable a money market for RPL aimed at short selling. Tetu Finance released an auto-balancing rETH pool that focuses on the Aura ecosystem to maximize returns based on whether the balancer or Aura pool is currently paying out higher incentives. A very cool little sort of DeFi building block advancement. Further, we have a proposal ongoing by Parallel Protocol to onboard rETH as collateral. Big week for integrations. In governance, the GMC worked with ClimateDAO to offset the entire emissions history of Rocket Pool. The IMC election is ongoing. 9 members have to be selected out of the candidate pool 12. These people will be responsible for some pretty important decisions related to Rocket Pool's incentive program. The PDAO has 2 recent budget reports posted to the forum related to the IMC budget and the overall Treasury report. In the realm of media and marketing, Lodestar announced a 25K prize pool with the help of ETHStaker if you use Lodestar's client. Volcania, an infographic dashboard, listed RPL. Rocket Pool participated in the ZK Sync Era mainnet launch, perhaps signaling something for the future. The rETH market cap dipped into the top 100 and is currently flirting with it as CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap still have some minor supply mismatch issues. Dookie, oh snap, I think I missed this earlier. Oh man, I'm sorry, Dookie. Dookie, who runs the Rocket Pool Korea Twitter account, which is awesome and I love, released his Korean translation of my own essay, Why Paradigm is Wrong, How rETH Will Flip Steve. So if you have not already, and if you have Korean friends who are interested in crypto, make sure you share that around. Again, that is on the Rocket Pool Korea Twitter account. Illuminati DAO staked over 100 ETH with Rocket Pool, as DAOs continue to love Rocket Pool. We had some great media coverage, FX Street mentioning how Rocket Pool will benefit from the upcoming Shapella hard fork. Token in Motion, Sleety.eth, our own community-born artiste, produced a wonderful animated thread discussing how Rocket Pool works at the sort of sky-high view. We had the first of the 2 planned Atlas AMAs, which is available now on YouTube. This was pretty detailed and very informative, so if you have any questions about Atlas, you could probably find your answer in there. There was a community call featuring Ether Capital on Twitter. Silo Finance joined our previous community call, and as they said, they are now supporting rETH and RPL fixed market lending. Langers, meanwhile, was on the post-Shanghai institutional staking Twitter space, which you can find on the Staking Rewards Twitter account. Galaxy put out a research piece covering the Atlas upgrade and talking highly of Rocket Pool, and we saw similar content by Crypto Russ. Seeking Alpha also published a recent research piece about Rocket Pool's strong fundamentals and upcoming catalysts. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, cough cough, rugged by Elon, Mav had to cover 4 Langers on the Exponential DeFi podcast, Degen Responsibly. Further, and lastly, we had some cool big institutional coverage from Delphi Digital in their liquid staking video, as well as Consensus when they were discussing the Shanghai upgrade. That has been 2 days and this fortnight's Rocket Pool community call. Thank you all for joining. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jasper, and thanks, Langers, and thanks for everyone listening in. And of course, this will be up on YouTube shortly.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Good night.